his father was dead. You're dead to me. You are dead to me. So can I have what's mine? So doesn't make sense, but we read it here in two different places. The son of mine that was dead. Spiritually speaking, did you know that my kids are not saved because their dad's a pastor? Does that surprise you? They have to have their own salvation. There's no free tickets here. Nobody gets on free. Nobody gets to slide by. We all have. Every knee shall bow means every knee shall bow. See, this brother of yours was dead. It was even customary in that time and place to hold an official ceremony. Have you ever seen a movie where they say, "You're dead to me"? They would hold a ceremony to show that that person was dead. They'd have a funeral, and that would be the end of it. And they would have no more relationship with them. And that would happen from time to time. When somebody got written off, their name was removed, it was blotted out forever. Does that sound familiar? In the Word it tells us that your name can be blotted out. And that's it. You're out of the family. You're no longer part of the family. I know the Asians are very strong in this. They will take somebody out of the family and say, you are dead to me. You are dead to me. I do not hear your voice. You are dead to me. But the only way back is restitution. And some way to earn your place back in the graces of the family for your dishonor. The system was very clear. Everybody understood it that was listening to the story. That the father was the head and he was to be honored. And then came the older brother, the firstborn. Then came the younger brother. There's always motive when Jesus speaks. Always, always, always. And you know what the motive is? Your heart. Your heart. Rona asked me a couple weeks ago about any commonalities that I have in my studies when I give a sermon. And I told her yes. Two things. Love. Love is very important. And hope. Every message that I preach, I work love and hope in it. But even the strong ones, folks, even the ones that are hard, even the tough ones, even when I speak about hell, it can be filled with love because you know what? It's compassionate in the sense that I don't want anybody to go there. Jesus spoke more of hell than he ever did of heaven. And he warned them about it. I read an article this last week from Ronald Reagan's son, Ron Reagan. I didn't realize this, but he's an atheist. And he says that he has no problem partying with his buddies in hell. Let me tell you, there is no partying going on in hell. As I shared with you last week, the last 3 weeks, about the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man sought to be comforted with just one drop of water on his tongue. And the answer was no. No, you had your comfort here in this life. You had your opportunities here in this world and in this time. And you refused. You refused. This story is filled with, it's compelling and it's filled with drama and scandal. It had an audience of sons and daughters who were listening to the story. And maybe they too had an idea that they wanted their inheritance, how in their minds and in their hearts that they could have what they thought was theirs so they could just take off and leave. Because we read that this young son, that he went to a distant country. And he packed his bags and went away. He didn't go from here to Los Chavez. No, this guy went far away. The audience was listening, no doubt. They don't realize now, but Jesus has lowered his nets into the water. They don't realize that pretty soon they'll be caught in his net and brought up to the boat. I always, when I like to make a point, sometimes I'll do this. Like I'm casting and then I'm reeling you guys in. Jesus did the same thing but with a net. I have to use a hook. But Jesus can use a net. And he set it all out for them. The act of the youngest son is nothing short of shameless. It was a terrible, terrible thing. It was the lowest in the line of honor in expressing your love for your father. And his request was, Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me. Give it to me. Young people. And we're all fairly young in here. How many of us have the mindset that there are things that you want to accomplish before you commit yourself to God? You don't have to raise your hand. I thought that way. Lord, I would love to be in the ministry, but I got to do this, I got to do that, I got a family to raise, I got all these things I have to do before I can make an all-out commitment to you. And God's not asking me to pack up and leave. He just wanted to know if I was willing to do it. If I was willing to serve and willing to obey. But this son wasn't willing to wait. He's telling his dad, give it to me. And he uses the word estate. In the Greek, it's a totally different word that's used here and nowhere else in the New Testament. It means goods. It means property. It means the portion. Okay? Things that are tangible, that you can hold, that you can touch, that you can see. Right? So he wants the part of the estate. He's asking for material stuff. He's asking for the land, for the animals, the buildings, whatever is there. Okay? That's what he wants. You said that one day that shopping mall will be mine. I want it now. Or you said I'm going to own that 200 acres. I want it. And the cattle on it. You said I could have it. I want them. Now be mindful of this. What's he going to do with them? He's leaving. So what's he going to do with them? Sell them. He needs cash. Can you imagine the dishonor that his father, who had that maybe generationally, he had that land, that property, he worked it. He grew the feed that's growing on there, the alfalfa, the grass, the rye, whatever's on it, and all the cattle that are on it, the buildings he probably built, all these things, and the son wants them so he could sell them. It means nothing to him. It's pretty incredible. But that's you and me too. It's in our youth wanting to reap everything that we can when we're young. We want it all. We're hungry for it. We want every bit of it. We want it now. We don't realize the cost. We don't realize the work and the effort that went into it, do we? I remember one time I gave Reagan some brand new saddlebags for his motorcycle. They were mine. And I bought them, and I told him, son, now when you sell this bike, you make sure I get the saddlebags back. They're very nice saddlebags. And he rolls up one day in a new motorcycle. And the first thing in my mind is, where's my saddlebags? And he told me, Dad, the guy wanted them for part of the deal. Can I tell you, it's easy to barter something that's not yours. It's easy to give away something that costs you nothing. It's easy to dismiss it. It's easy just to blow off because it's not yours. And I think that's how it is for us sometimes too. We take for granted the things that God has given us. Even in our youth, our strength should be used in serving God. Lately, I don't know why I've been hearing a lot of sermons about retirement. And because I'm right there at retirement. I can retire any day now. And I'm not going to. But then I heard last week a message on retiring. And it's exactly what I've been saying, is that when we retire as pastors, all that means is that we're no longer maybe the senior pastor. But we never stop being part of the church and serving the church. One day we'll get a young, sharp man up here that wants to lead the flock, a Joshua, right? Because I'm starting to feel like Moses. Yeah, I need a Ben and a her to hold me up. You and her, Ben. Her's a him, not a her. Okay. Anyway, his request was not scriptural. There was nothing scriptural about it. In Deuteronomy 21:17 it says, "But he shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the unloved, by giving him a double portion of all that he has. For he is the beginning of his strength. To him belongs the right of the firstborn." So we see here the oldest son should get double what the other brother would get. So he would get 2/3 and the other brother would get 1/3. So regardless of what he thought he was getting, it's not going to be equal to what his brother gets. His brother's going to get twice as much. But they must have had a lot. And I'm starting to wind down here so I don't go over like I did last time. They must have had a lot when you think about it. They had servants. It cost a lot of money to have servants. They had hired musicians and dancers for the party. They hired men that they employed outside to take care of all the work on the ranch, on the farm. They had animals, including a fattened calf that they always kept in the ready in the day of celebration. And they must have had a substantial enough state that they had enough that they could get his third. He still would have his third. He's in the field working when he hears all this going on, right? As he gets closer, he hears the music, and he probably hears the mariachis over here, and he's thinking, what's going on? What are they doing down there? And he's getting closer and closer. But all he wanted was his. You see, the normal word for inheritance is a different word used from the younger son. That word implies that which is given to you, that which has been assigned to you. It's something that's given almost in love. You feel the love in the inheritance that's meant that because you were faithful to me, I want you to have this. I want you to have this. You were faithful. You earned it, right? It was something that belongs to me, and now it belongs to you. I gave Jace something the other day that was very important to me. I told him, son, one day this was mine, and I thought I'd be giving it to one of my sons. But I'm giving this to you. And some may say, well, wait a minute, that that should go to one of your sons, not your grandsons. First of all, let me say this. It's mine. I'll do what I want with it. That's what God says. It was his. It's mine. And I know who will appreciate it the most. I know who will use it. See, Jace is always with me. He's like my shadow. If I'm outside, Jace is outside. In fact, the other day he came over and said, Papa, can I borrow the Gator? You guys remember the little green car I have? Anyway, I said, okay, son, what are you doing? He says, well, I have to pick up some weeds that I cut, and I'm going to dump them in the back. So I was so tempted to go out there with him. But I watched him, and here's this little 8-year-old boy with a pitchfork stacking up all these weeds and picking up all this stuff that was in front of his house, put it in the Gator, and drive it in the back. And he dumped them in a pile so we can burn them. Came in, and he sat next to me like he had just got through building a road. He had that smile, that grin from ear to ear. I said, did you get it all done, son? He said, I did, Papa. You want to look at it? I said, I do. Let's go look at it. And he did a great job. I told him, son, you did a wonderful job. I said, you can borrow anything that belongs to your Papa. Because now I know you know how to use it. You know how to work. And you do good work, son. And because I've always told him, you do good work because your name is on it. You leave your name on whatever you do, you're leaving your name on it. So you do a good work, and you do the best you can. And if you're having trouble, he even had an axe out there, and he cut out a root from a dead tree. Took him 2 days. I want him to know how to work. And I didn't teach my boys how to work. it was just easier for me to do it. Get out of the way. You're going to cut off your foot, and then it's going to just, you're going to be hobbling around here because, yeah. And I would never give Rona an X. I think we're going to end there. Let me just end with, I think I'm going to cut it short here. Oh, we're ahead. Oh my God. Rona, I never asked her to come out and help me. I don't, so it's not her fault. I never asked. And she's never said, how come you never asked me to go out and help you? Let's stand. So now the story doesn't contain everything that needs to be said about salvation. It does talk about salvation. This story it's not the whole story or the whole message of salvation, but it leads us to the cross. This is a story that I think for most of us, we're going to be very surprised when we learn some facts about who the primaries are in this story. And there's no reconciliation apart from the death of Christ. We all understand that, right? That there's no way into heaven without God. Jesus said, I am the way. The way where? I am the truth and I am the life. And so the only way to the Father, the Bible says, is through the Son. And so the Son is telling the story. The Son, Jesus, is telling the story to this crowd of people. The cross is not in the story, but it's yet to come. The cross is not far away. That Passion Week is not far from this time. And so this is not a full theology of salvation that we're going to talk about, but it deals with some of the essential elements of sin. Sin is a terrible thing. I liken sin to cancer. Yeah, when someone has cancer, they want it out of them. They want it out. Desperate. Get it out. All of it. Make sure you get all. Even if you have to take good skin. Take good flesh. Take it. Take it. And that's exactly what sin does. Is it degrades our flesh. This body. Sin wears on us. But the story does deal with some of the essential elements of sin. And how it is that we reconcile with God. And how there's rejoicing, the celebration. The Bible tells us that when one comes to the Lord, in Luke it tells us that when one who is lost has been found, the angels in heaven rejoice over the salvation of that one person. Can you imagine? Every time somebody gives their life, they purpose their life for God, how the angels rejoice. And just to make sure that we're all on the same sheet of music here, like I said, the story tells about three main characters. The younger son, the father, and the older son. And it really should be divided that way, and I believe once we go through this, you'll understand why. But we begin with the younger son, because Jesus spoke of the younger son. It says in verse 11, and he said, a certain man had two sons. And the younger of them came to his father and said, give me the share of the estate that falls to me. And we're going to stop here just for a minute. Although the prodigal son, we hear the story of the prodigal son, we think this guy is the main part of the story. And for a lot of us, we're like the prodigal son. It's not until later in life do we recognize the riches, the inheritance of life that God's given us, that we've wasted it. And we're mindful of it. I'll share a story from last night. As I was preparing, I got a phone call. And it was my daughter, Rachel. And she's crying and crying. And sweetheart, what's going on? Are you okay? Are you all right? What's going on? And she said, Dad, I just listened to your sermon, Who's the Loser Now? And she said, Dad, I've been the loser of my whole life because I had it in front of me all this time. I had in front of me, you've been preaching all this time. But I just thought I could do whatever I wanted to do. And that because I was a preacher's kid, I could live my life any way I wanted to live my life. But she says, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm tired of living that life. I'm tired of running from God. You told me that one time, and I told you I wasn't, but I was. I was angry. I was angry. She told me I was angry when my son died. I was angry. And I told her, you have a right to be angry, but not with God. And she was disappointed because her son had a game. She had to take him. He's 8 years old. Because she said, Dad, I want to start going to church and being accountable. I want to spend eternity in heaven with you and Mom and the Lord. I never expected that call last night. But can I tell you that I've been praying desperately for my kids? And when I pray, it's not a passing prayer. I pray until I fall asleep. And there are nights that I've been up till 4 o'clock in the morning. And I pray, and I pray, and I pray. And I was so grateful. You know, if all the times that I tried to explain things to her or to comfort her, it may have helped, but it didn't do it. She had to come on her own. You see, the whole thing about this story here about the prodigal son, the word says that he had a want. He had a need that couldn't be met. And that's what's going on with her. Right now, she has a need, that emptiness, that void. Her son died two years ago. And she still has that void, that healing she needs. And she realizes now that the only one that can provide that is God. I tell you that on behalf of Rona and I so that you can be encouraged. We've been praying for our children for many, many years. And preachers' kids are the worst. They are. The PKs, they're the worst. So, you know, they tend to wander. And this story is for me. As I read the story, as I'm searching the story, as I get comfort from the story, I'm mindful of who God is. The story that Jesus is telling about, and those who are attendants, it's the tale of two sons. That was my second option for the title of this message. The tale of two sons. Our kids aren't alike, are they? Now, we have 3 kids. They were all brought up same home, same family, same rules, and all 3 are different. And I think that's God's way of preparing them for the world. Because when they go out into the world, they're not going to meet people like them. They're not going to meet and get along with people. And so they have all the issues they have at home, and they work them out, and hopefully by the time they mature, they've grown out of it, and they've learned those skill sets that they can get along with other people. Because then they go to school and they intermingle with other characteristics, other characters too. And the climax of the story that's being told, of the whole story indicates, is that the other son, the one we don't know about, that it's really the main object of the story, not the prodigal son. And many of us, because a lot of preachers only preach about the prodigal. Because we all like a good ending, don't we? And this is not a good ending. You look at the story, the series of Who's a Loser Now, we had the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man, it didn't end well for him, did it? We don't like to talk about that, but I believe that we should. Why? Because it's the gospel in its totality, right? You preach it all. Jesus didn't say you just preach this or that. Give this snippet or just use this scripture. He said you preach the gospel. That's all that needs to be done. And I suppose if I asked you what prodigal meant, you probably would want to look it up in a dictionary to find the proper word for it, to find out what word it means. So anyway, it means spendthrift. Did you know that? A spendthrift. A prodigal son is a spendthrift. One who spends, who just lavishes, who wastes. That's what the word prodigal means. And it's a picture of you and me. It's a picture of those who have squandered what God's given them in this life and have been self-serving. They have acquired things for themselves and themselves only. The difference, of course, as we read about the prodigal son, the younger son, is that he comes to himself, the word says, as he's laying there in the pig pen, desiring to eat the pods that the pigs are eating. The word says he comes to himself. He realizes at that point, I have a father that would allow me to become a servant of his. Do you get the picture? Our Heavenly Father. And you and I live in a pig's pen. And yet we can cry out to God and tell him, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. See, this whole story can play both ways. And I'll kind of share some of the things on both sons as we go through this, but my primary goal is the one that stayed home. Because we think that the one that stayed home was the better son, don't we? Because he never left. He should be entitled to everything. That's the one that should have the favor of the Father. That's the one that should get it all. Everybody looks at this guy, and they think, you did right, son. You stay with your dad. You're a good boy. Done what your dad's told you. And so, spendthrift, someone who is wasteful, a person who is senseless, extravagant, who is self-indulgent, someone who thinks about themselves. You know people like that? That everything is about them? Everything. You know, they got mirrors everywhere. Maybe they put a selfie on Facebook every morning. Their selfies, it's like unbelievable. They have more pictures of themselves than anyone you've ever seen. But we finished our series, and so I think this is a great time for us to get into this particular story. I think this is also a really good name for the first son, a spendthrift. He spent his daddy's money. It wasn't really his. We'll talk about that. And be mindful too of these people who may have been sitting on a small hill as Jesus spoke to them. And there may have been thousands there. But it's not a word that in the story anywhere. We don't find the word prodigal in the story anywhere. Yet he's known as a prodigal son, yet the story doesn't ever say prodigal. We make an assumption. We apply that word because of its meaning. The spendthrift, he wasted it. You know, he indulged in things of himself. And as we read this, as we get into the story, Jesus said a certain man had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, give me all the share of the estate that falls me. And when Jesus said that, you can imagine what the Pharisees would have done. They would have gasped. They would have drawn back. They would have looked at him like, you don't know what you're talking about. You see, in the custom of that day, you never asked for your inheritance before they died. If the kids came and say, Dad, can I have all this stuff when you die? I would sleep with my doors locked, eyes opened. I would get a bulldog to be in the house. I don't know, right? Yeah, you just, it's not something that you do. You don't go ask for your inheritance before. Actually, it was considered a very bad thing. You were ousted by it. If you had a child that went and did that to the father, to the family, he was ousted. For him to think that he was going to get anything. And so this is an absolute outrageous statement. Jesus telling the story is an absolute outrage. And you can imagine the people are now starting to kind of recline a little bit. And this is getting interesting. I wonder how it's all going to end. And now he's likely not married because he wants to go and he wants to sow some of his wild oats. And he's probably a teenager or in the early 20s. And he's disrespectful toward his father, even though he lacks no love from his daddy. His daddy loves him. As you read the story, you know that he's well loved. And there's not an ounce of gratitude in his heart, any of it, or even for his family because of the request that he made. And perhaps there are those who would, in hearing the story and living in these times, that they lived to interpret the story that the son to say, Dad, I wish you were dead. To some, that's what they perceive the younger son saying. In reality, Dad, I wish you were dead, because I would have my inheritance. But since you're not, will you give it to me? Will you let me have it now? Can I have what's mine? You're in the way of my plans, Dad. You're a barrier. You're a hindrance. I want my freedom. Have your kids ever said that to you? I can hardly wait till I move out. Me too. Yeah, they're always threatening to leave. But it's all words. And now we have kids moving back in, don't we? Yeah. The grandkids have keys to our house, not the kids. Maybe you said this. I got other plans. I'd love to stay here, stick around, take care of you, help with the business. But I got other plans. And they don't involve you. I'm sorry, Dad. My plans that I have for my life don't involve you. They don't even involve my family. I'm moving away. I'm going to get as far as I can from this small town. They don't involve my family. They don't involve this estate or this village, my town. I want nothing to do with any of you. I just want my inheritance, which is equal to saying, I wish you were dead. Because then all that could happen for him. If his father was dead, then he'd get his entitlement. I use the word entitlement, inheritance. And then he could leave and do whatever he wants. And in a culture where honor was so important, this was a blasphemy to speak. And in a culture based upon a 10 commandment, honor your father and mother. You know that of all the 10 commandments, it's the only one that comes with a promise. God's serious about that. And let me tell you what they would do. If you were a kid that was always getting in trouble, they'd take you outside the city gates, they would put you in a pit, and then they would heave large stones and stone you to death. That's why the promise of a long life was given. Because if you didn't honor your mother and father, they would kill you. They would do away with you. Now, you got to remember something about the Jewish people. They didn't have they didn't have a sheriff's department or police department. They didn't have probation. They didn't have a CYFD. They just took care of it themselves. In fact, they didn't even have a jail. They just dealt with it themselves. So in a culture that's based upon 10 commandments of honoring your mother and father, this story was really out there for them. The son would make such a request, an outrageous request from his father. And you see that it worked. You see it. And I want to stop here for a second to say that you too are this prodigal son. We're hearing this and we're thinking, wow, this is outlandish. How could this guy ever do this? But how many times did we have opportunities to serve God in our youth and we didn't? And it's not until we had a need in our life. It's not until we had a great loss in our life. It's not until we suffered in our life that we ran to a Heavenly Father. The same could be said to each and every one of us. That we were prodigals, that we were spendthrifts, that we wasted everything. The time, the energy, the talents that we had, we wasted them on the world. And we use those as a benefit for ourselves, that we might get ahead. But God was never glorified by them. For the son to make this request to his dad, it would have been as though he said, Dad, you're dead to me. But give me my inheritance. I have led many people in the sinner's prayer. Many people. And I think to some degree people will come up here and what they want is relief from all the anxiety, the pain, the suffering that they're going through. Never realizing the idea that God is our Heavenly Father. In fact, in the prayer, when the apostles came to Jesus and they said, teach us to pray. And Jesus said, pray in this way. He didn't say pray this prayer. He said, pray in this way. And then he led with the first words out of his mouth, our Father. He established a relationship, didn't he? The first thing we realize is that he's our daddy, our Abba Father. Hallowed be thy name, that he is holy. And then thy kingdom come, thy will be done, that there's a responsibility, that God has a plan, and we have a responsibility in response to that plan. So those who were listening to the story that Jesus was telling, I can imagine how they probably thought, is he here? Is a younger son here? Because I'd like to slap him. Right? They're probably thinking that. Have you ever thought that? We watched a movie last night about a young girl. It's a true story. It was a young African American girl who was in an orphanage, and one of the counselors there fell in love with her and wanted to raise her. And the manager of this of the program of the house wouldn't let her. Said that it wouldn't be right for a black child to be with a white woman. And so they denied the request. It was such a beautiful story. And it's a true story. And she got set up, and she had to go from orphanage to orphanage. She went to different houses, and they abused her. And then she grew up, became became professional, and she had money. She did well, successful, but she never stopped looking for that woman. And as a woman, she would send out emails and found her on some social media. And they were reunited. And this little girl, at the end of the story, is probably in her 30s when they found each other. And the woman, who's probably in her 70s, 60s, still wanted to adopt her. And so they did it legally. And I think that's how God is. That it's never too late. It's never too late for God to take in another child. We think it's too late. We think, I've done so much. I've been so bad. Look where I come from. I don't even have a home. I don't even know my family. I have nothing. I come from nothing. My grandmother lived in an orphanage. And you know, and she was she was a woman that prayed for me all the time. She was always singing. And this woman came from an orphanage, and I think, wow, how much joy she had. But the joy of the Lord was her strength. And back to the story, we read in Luke 24 and the verse 32. That is why in verse 24, when it comes back, the father says, this son of mine was dead. And then again in verse 32 to the older brother, he said, this brother of yours was dead. So that falls right in line with the thinking that when the younger son asked for his inheritance, he was basically asking because in his mind